Hello, I'm back with another build video. This one is going to be for the Pally heal, which I just recently built up for this mod to heal the new trial. The last time I've healed on this Pally heal was probably mod 17, 18 for the Tom days. So I had a decent amount of work to put in, but it was mostly just the companions and the gear, which I already had all the gear saved up. So I'm gonna go over. This is gonna be kind of like a combination of mod 30 and 31 equipment, and I'm gonna show ultimately what I'm trying to go for mod 31, because some of the gear is like extremely difficult to farm out because of the drop rates. But I'll just go ahead and get into it. So for our gear, currently I'm using this helmet. This drops from the new trial, the new master version. 9% outgoing healing. What I'm ultimately going to go for is the celestial one, this one, because it gives a max of 50% extra divinity regen and 5% crit strike tacked on, so it's ridiculously strong. If you're not able to run the master trial and you don't have this helmet that I'm currently using, then I would use this one from Lair of the Mad Dragon. It gives 5% outgoing healing and power after 50 seconds, so it's really good in longer boss fights and stuff. Most fights it'll be able to proc up, just not mobs. Chestplate I'm currently using is this one from Lair of the Mad Dragon as well. It gives that 7.5% critical strike and critical severity. What I'm ultimately going to go for once again is possibly this one that gives 5% outgoing healing and crit strike and 3% forte, but I don't think I'm actually going to go for this one. Instead, I think I'm going to go for this one because it's essentially a direct upgrade of what I'm currently using, just with higher item level. It's about 600 more item level, I think, except the ratings on it are pretty terrible since you like deflect forte and control bonus. That's like almost the worst possible rating distribution that you can think of, but I'd still use it either way just for the item level increase. The gloves, luckily I literally just got these today. These are the new celestial gloves that are basically a direct upgrade of what we had in past mods for the extra divinity, maximum divinity. And they also give 5% outgoing healing tacked on, so they're incredibly strong. Unfortunately, one of the ratings is combat advantage, which doesn't make any sense because you're never really going to use this on a DPS. But that's what you would go for. If you don't have these, then obviously you're going to probably use these ones from Dread Sanctum. They're basically just the same thing, except they have 3.5% forte instead of 5% outgoing healing. And obviously they have, 800 less item limit. The weapons, I'm currently on Solarium. I really need to run Master Infernal Citadel in order to get or Imperial Citadel in order to get the MIC weapons. So I'm just using these for the 6% overall outgoing healing that they give. The MIC weapons are really good in the new trial for pretty much every class because they give up to 11% for tanks and healers instead of just 6%. These boots, I'm currently using one more thing I'll mention about weapons. Obviously the best thing to use is Mastercraft, but I don't have any of the newer Mastercraft, and it's usually not that big a difference, so I just mostly keep on Solarium, but Mastercraft is technically what you want to be using as a support. But I just have Bronzewood from 5 years ago, so I'm not really that concerned about it. So I just keep on Solarium most of the time. But now talking about the boots. So these are the boots that come from Master Dread Sanctum. They give that 25% performance regen, or divinity regen I should say. And apparently, so I've heard, they stack with the new helmet, the new celestial helmet. So you could technically get up to 75% divinity regen. Let's just say they don't stack with the new helmet, then I would probably instead, or if you wanted more stats, instead I would use these ones. It says when you damage your target, but I believe they just proc off of like pretty much any hit that you do to the target, including at wills and stuff, so I'm pretty sure a healer should be able to keep up the 5 stacks pretty easily. I haven't personally tested them on a healer to see if they do stack, but a DPS can stack them with every single hit they do, no matter how small, so I'm guessing it works the same. But those give, 21% stats, and they're really strong for healers as well as DPS. That's only if these boots do not stack with the Celestial Helmet. I'll, need to check that myself and see if anyone on PC's tested it, but now moving on to the right side, I'm currently using the Detector set for that 7% Forte and overall alchemy healing, which you could pretty consistently proc on the healer. The other thing to use if you're running content where you don't need to heal quite as, big, is the Vistani set, which, since I just built this Pally heal to heal the trial, I don't have the Vistani set yet, but I'll just show it real quick if I can find it. This one, it gives that 5% extra damage to the target, and you can just use one of the at-wills to proc it, which I'll go over in a couple minutes. This set you can just buy off the auction house mostly, I think. Let's check. Vistani. So 38,000 and 59,000, and then the artifact itself is the Taroka deck. So we need to go in artifacts. Taroka deck, it's 184k, but you can unbind it, so it's not that bad. It's a good investment. I would definitely consider that. So that's what I would use in a normal group most of the time. And I would just keep on this if you're really if you really need to heal. For the rings, I'm using currently the 4% power ring from MDS and the multi-target heal ring for 7% overall alchemy healing for the shelters. Eventually I'm probably going to, if I get it, drop this ring for the crit severity ring, possibly, that drops from the new trial. Let me just show it real quick. So this thing, it's very rare, but the ratings on it are pretty decent, and it gives that 7% crit severity. Crit severity is a little bit more tricky to get on the Paladin healer, so it's the reason why that's what I would probably go for. So that's, they're incredibly rare, and the auction house for these is upwards of 25 to 35 mil on PlayStation right now. So I'm not sure if it's actually worth equipping one if I got one to drop, and I definitely wouldn't buy it for more than 2 or 3 mil myself if I can farm for it. So that's what I would use probably instead of this ring. I think I'd probably just keep this ring on for the extra overall healing, or the extra, overall outgoing healing that you get. Shirts and pants, I'm still using this crappy shirt from Moon Dancer because I haven't had the new shirt from the trial to drop yet. So it gives 7.5% outgoing healing, and the one from the trial, if I show it real quick, gives 7.5% outgoing healing as well. And it gives outgoing healing and crit severity rating, so it's pretty good rating wise. I think this one gives incoming healing, so the ratings on it are a lot better on the new one as well. You also get the set bonus, which this one doesn't have I don't have a set bonus completed yet, so you get 2% extra over alcohol healing. But I also have the pants, which I managed to get to drop from the new trial. These give 6% alcohol healing and almost 6,000 power rating. If you don't have the opportunity of getting the trial equipment, then I would use these 9% crit severity pants instead. Those are pretty much the next best thing to use on a healer. So yeah, that's pretty much all the gear. These rings are pretty easy to get, so I'm not really there's not really any alternatives that I would use besides these right now. And the shirt's fairly easy to get as well. I think these shirts drop in the advanced version of Moon Dancer as well, if I'm not mistaken. So enchantments, I'm just using, you know, whatever I need to balance. So I'm just assorted stuff. But let me go and put some garnets in instead of those. And then I use Divine Aegis outside of the trial because it gives 9% overall outgoing healing. And I use Lightning Flash in the new trial because even though they said in the patch notes the overall outgoing healing will still work in the trial, it's completely disabled and it doesn't seem to work at all. So I just keep on Lightning Flash inside of the trial. I use movement speed just to get around faster, and then overloads. I use the 5% crit strike and the 5% maximum hit points. If you wanted to swap that, you could also use the action point one, but I personally like the hit points one better. Put that one on. And utility, we use this for outgoing healing on healers generally. Let's see. So now I'll go to boons. I just use power, defense, and movement speed once again. Campaign boons, I go all power, crit strike, crit severity, all hit points, movement speed, and then I use forte and outgoing healing. And then I just use the two on the far right. But there's not really any other master boons I would consider on a healer. So, and I don't have the most boon points on this character, so pretty much all I would go for if I had extra boons would be some defensive stats and then the resistance versus certain enemies like cultists and fiends and zombies and stuff. Those are the three that I would go for, I would say. For companions, summoned, of course you just need to do whatever normal debuff companions you have. So, Tutor, Spine Devil, Portobello, Flapjack, and Drist are the main ones that you're going to have in a dungeon. And Scorpion, which usually you have a DPS on the Scorpion. I don't have a Scorpion though. Etrian, Blue Fire Eye, Roth, the Roth Companion. Those are also good options to upgrade for trial groups. But the 4 minus Etrian that I have up here, or I guess 5 minus Etrian, are the ones that I would upgrade for, like the main ones to upgrade as a support for dungeons specifically. Equipment, I just went ahead and bought the outgoing healing, incoming healing stuff from the auction house because it was like 3.6 mil or something for the 3 of them, rather than farming Mount Hotenau. But technically the ones from Mount Hotenau are still better. I'll just show those real quick. Where's Mount Hotenau? There it is. So companion gear, the best one to go for still is, I mean, you could go either outgoing healing crit strike for extra ratings, or if you don't need the ratings, you can go for outgoing healing and forte. And they give the same distribution of ratings there. The only thing is you lose 1200 item level using those for extra forte. So I feel like the new stuff is not a bad investment. Because it actually does give more outgoing healing than it does for incoming healing, so that's good if anything. Enhancement, I usually use dulled senses in like dungeons, and then in trials, usually you put the pally heal on the less important one of the enhancements, so maybe slowed reactions or one of the damage debuff ones. Companion bonuses, I'm using Golden Bullet, Tamed Raptor, Alpha Compy. The Wolf, this one is kind of unobtainable, so instead of this I would just swap in maybe a Drist or something instead, or the Kinku Archer, which I have equipped already. And then I'm using the Kinku Archer right now, but if you do not have this helmet and these gloves or whatever, and you're missing some outgoing healing in the build, then you can swap that out for the Pink Yeti instead for 9% extra outgoing healing. But I'm just about capped on outgoing healing with those extra gear pieces I've got, so that's the reason why I swapped in the Kinku Archer instead. For mounts, I'm currently on Mystic Aura, but you could swap in Runic Aura or Pack Tactics if you have. I haven't upgraded Runic Aura yet on this character, but I'm sure I will in the future. And then obviously your normal debuffs, Bat Swarm, Elion, whatever, T-Rex. The stable, I using a couple more rhythms than I usually do just for the extra outgoing healing. But these bonuses, you can see I'm using 1 Mender, 1 Trainer's Restoration, 1 Executioner's, 1 Guardian Spirit for the extra survivability, and 1 Cautious Devotion for the 5% outgoing healing. And it seems like they fixed this bonus, so it actually does give a flat 5% outgoing healing now, whereas previously it used to give you ratings instead of outgoing healing. So that's nice that they fixed it. And you can see the mounts that I have in the stable. These are all preferred bonuses, so it's nice. And then I also have for my collars, obviously the normal ones, crit severity, movement speed, and counter power, rough astral diamonds, and then instead of stamina gain, obviously we use outgoing healing on the 5th collar, so it's just note to note. And then I didn't go over artifacts, but real quick, I'm using the Blast Scepter primary. That's generally what you have the healer on. And then these are the secondary ones. These two are high item level and they give good stats for healers, power, and forte. There's not really any other high item level artifacts that give good stats. And then obviously the set bonus, which gives power if anything, but it's pretty lacking on the stats here for healers. And you could use any 4 of these as a debuff artifact. They're all good. The Pelor gives 8%, but it lasts for 15 seconds instead, so it's still comparable to the other ones. And now we'll just go ahead and go over powers real quick. So I mostly keep all the same stuff most of the time, but Divine Fulmination is their ranged at will, and this is the one that you could, well, I guess technically not. I think this is a single target power. I was gonna say you could proc Vistani with this, but no, I don't think you can. I think you have to have Radiant Slam equipped in order to proc it. So this one is an AoE, and it's a pretty fast cast, so you can pretty easily proc Vistani off cooldown. And you can also proc your enhancement as well. And then I usually use this in case you have to go out for mechanics or whatever. You can still hit the boss in order to proc your stuff, like Dulled Senses or whatever. And then I just use Valor Strike if I'm not using Vistani, which obviously I haven't been since I don't have it. Cause I usually have these two equipped. I don't even really worry about Cure Wounds because you just pop Divine Shelter for the same return. For our powers, I pretty much always use Sacred Weapon, Circle of Divinity. These are your two Divinity regen powers, and then Divine Shelter is your main form of healing. If you're running a dungeon, you might swap out the Circle of Divinity for Divine Touch, because this one will raise the Divine Barrier, and if you use it on the tank, only the tank, then it's going to be a much faster thing than holding down your Channeled Divinity in order to shield them. So that's also an option, but I usually don't worry about that. I usually just Divine Shelter and people are fine. And if I need to, then I can use Channeled Divinity on the tank. The dailies, Shield of Faith is the main one that you want to mitigate with, but if you're doing something where mitigation's pretty easy to mitigate and you don't have to worry about giving shields like right after the mitigation goes off, then you could also use Sanctuary, because it's going to be a slightly higher mitigation. It's 15% instead of the pitiful 5%. The problem with Sanctuary is that you have to stand still and you're not able to give shields during it because you have to channel it. And it's also a little bit annoying to cancel out of it and then give people shields. So there's going to be like a full half second or 1 second delay before people get shields back if there's a mitigation that you have to instantly give people shields for after the mitigation goes off. But in places like Tom, Sanctuary is good, and you know, Zerial and Zimnid as well, I would say. Class features, you always want to use Composure for that extra 10% Divinity regen. The second one is situational. Most of the time you want to use Aura of Wrath for the extra 4% crit strike you give to the party. But if you're running something that really needs a lot of healing, like the new trial, Aura of Restoration is an option because it does that incoming healing benefit for your entire party, not just yourself, or not just giving you extra healing, but it gives the other healer extra healing as well by 10%, essentially. There's not really anything else I would consider using. It's pretty much just Aura of Wrath and Aura of Restoration. A lot of people don't even need the crit strike from this anymore in trials and stuff, so I mean, Aura of Restoration is quite a huge benefit. And for feats, lastly, we have, well, I mean, you can just see, but I'll explain my decision as to why. So whenever you use a power, you have a 10% chance for critical touch, which makes Divine Shelter and Divine Touch critically strike everybody, rather than it just being a 90% chance to crit. It's a 100% chance to crit everybody. And then the other one is just affects your at will, which is we don't even use anyway. The second one, this is kind of a toss-up, but we don't really use the Hand of Divinity thing very often anyway, which is your hold down R1 thing. I think. Yeah, you hold down R1 for that 1200 magnitude at max. We don't even use that very often, so you'd much rather want the passive divinity regen that this gives, and it lasts for 6 seconds anyway, so it's pretty much always going to be up, unless you're really having to do mechanics. The third one, we don't use Smite, obviously. Sacred Weapon, we definitely want to have this one because it restores divinity. The reduced damage taken is also a nice little benefit afterthought, but the main reason why we take this is for that restore divinity when we use Sacred Weapon, which is why we have it equipped. And luckily it's just a passive thing. We don't have to hit the target or anything, which I think was how it used to work. I think you used to have to hit the target for it to actually give you the divinity regen back. The fourth feat, this one is kind of a toss-up, and you would think that this one would be good, but if you think about it, it makes it to where when you use Shield of Faith, then you won't be able to you basically won't be able to generate divine barriers according to the tooltip. I haven't used it personally to see if that's how it works, but the wording of it makes it so you would presumably not be able to give people barriers when you use Shield of Faith, which is obviously the main reason why you have a Paladin in the first place. So we just use this one, even though we don't use Lay on Hands very often. It's just a placeholder pretty much. But it could be useful if you need to heal the tank instantly. But obviously I don't really use it very often in the first place. And then the last feat, this is pretty much the reason why Paladin has fairly large shields, is this last feat. So basically when you critically strike with your Divine Shelter or Divine Touch or whatever, then the effect of the barrier is increased by an additional 25%. The other one is kind of pointless because dropping below 10% divinity is not very often in the first place. You also get 20% outgoing healing, which we should already be just about capped anyway, without any procs, so it's just kind of pointless. And I mean, that 25% extra shields on this last feat are massive, so it's pretty much a no-brainer to use this top feat for that one. I don't think there's any other like passive stats or anything that you get. I will mention I am playing Aasimar just because it's a good class to play as both a healer and a tank for a Paladin. You could also play a Drow, but I mean, it's just kind of preference, to be honest. I wouldn't force people to race reroll for 5% extra damage that Drow gives, or whatever. So I don't think it's that big a deal. Attributes, obviously, we're just going for Dex and Wisdom. That's self-explanatory. And then for my buffs, I'm still buffed up for 4 more minutes, but I use Flask of Potency, Squash Soup, the Alchemy Healing Guild Food, and Wildstorm Elixir. So that gives 4% Alchemy Healing, or 4,000 Alchemy Healing. I also use the Forger's Box, which is only green right now, but I think maybe 4 or 6 more days I'll be able to get it to Mythic. So that's 3% extra power you're gonna be able to get. So that's why it's green. I haven't upgraded it yet. But I'll go over my stats real quick and just show what they proc up to roughly. So I currently have capped crit strike, crit severity, and power. The power is capped if I have the other aura, runic aura. So both auras in the group caps my power out to 80, 86% or whatever. And then, let's see, we gain 18% from the raptor. So, what, 86%? So that puts me up to 102% or whatever. And then I gain 6% from the Master Boon, so close to 110%. I gain about 3% more from this, so 113%. And then once I get that thing upgraded, the Forger's Box, that'll put me up to 116% or 17% or something like that, roughly. And I think that's about where I'm sitting. Oh yeah, and then we have the Etrian and the Portobello, which put me, both of those together probably put me close to 120, between 118 and 120%, I would guess. Crit Strike, I'm 78% right now with Aura of Wrath. I think I'm on Aura of Wrath still, yeah. I gain 7.5% from the chest plate, so that puts me up to, 85%. And I think that's all I get. I don't have any other procs as far as I know. Oh yeah, I get 2% from Etrian and 3% from the Blue Fire Eye, so that puts me technically up to 90% if we have all of those companions. And if we don't, then I am at 85% or 87% with Etrian, which we should have. Crit severity, I gain 7.5% from the armor. So that puts me up to, 112.5%. And I think that's all I get, if I'm not mistaken. It's the reason why I'm going to switch off of this to the other ring if I ever get it, because that'll put me to about 120% crit severity. And then for Outgoing Healing, lastly, it's currently 111%. And we gain 6% from this. So that puts me to 117%. And I think that's all we get. I don't think there's any other Outgoing Healing. But we also have the overall Outgoing Healing stat, which is currently 126%. So we gain an extra 6% from the shirt once it's proc, so that's 132% standing. And then I gain 7% from the neck and waist if I'm using it. So that puts me, what did I say? So that puts me at about 139% or something. Or 140, or close to 140. If I get the MIC weapons, that'll give me 5% more. So that would be 145%. And then I also get I technically get this. I don't know if this is counted in the overall calculation or not in the stat page. I don't think it is. But if there's a bard in the group, then I get another 15% overall going healing from them. So that puts me to 155 to 160% overall outgoing healing, which is absolutely massive. Looks like my buffs just ran out, actually. So yeah, I can, if I'm in a full group with all the expected buffs and everything, then I can give myself, or I can R1 shield about 2.2 million hit points outside of the group without being buffed up. Obviously, it's only about 1.6 million hit points that I can full shield maybe. But yeah, so my Divine Shelter on the other hand, let me just defeat myself real quick. I think my Divine Shelter with all the buffs and everything, I'm probably about 700k hit point Divine Shelter, 600 to 700k. And that's obviously using pretty much full Selfish just about. So obviously with debuff gear and stuff, I think it'd probably be closer to like 100 and, or it'd probably be closer to like 500 to 550k Divine Shelter maybe. But yeah, so that's pretty much where I'm sitting at with this character. And like I said, this is kind of like a combination mod 30, 31 build. And hopefully I eventually get gear, but with these current Celestial drop rate chances, we're going to be working on this stuff for like probably 8 months before we actually get all the gear, so it's pretty depressing for that. But yeah, so that's pretty much everything. So just let me know if there's any questions in the comments, and thanks for watching.